The void between stars was never truly empty. Even in the deepest black, far from light or warmth, things moved, some seen, most not. Tonight, something moved that should not have been there at all. Deep inside the Kessler Nebula, where gravity twisted like tangled wire and sensor beams bent into useless arcs, 32 human warships floated in perfect silence. No engines hummed, no comms chattered, not even a single maintenance drone drifted outside their hulls. They were ghosts wrapped in shadow, waiting. On the bridge of the lead ship, the Sovereign Will, Captain Luke Bell stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes stayed fixed on the main tactical display, a wide holotable glowing faint blue in the dim light. Every officer on deck held their breath, not from fear, but from tension so thick it pressed against the ears like deep water. "Phase dampeners holding at 98%, whispered Lieutenant Ava Holt from the sensor station. Her voice was low, steady, but her fingers tapped once against the console, a nervous habit she never admitted to. "Good," Luke said. Just one word, no more. He didn't need to say anything else. They all knew what came next. For years, the Zenthari Dominion had treated humanity like a nuisance, loud, messy, and too emotional to be a real threat. They let human colonies exist on the edges of Dominion space, mostly because they figured humans would destroy themselves before becoming dangerous. They laughed at human tactics, mocked their ship designs, called them barking apes with engines. They hadn't laughed in the last 72 hours. Because 72 hours ago, the United Earth Fleet vanished. Not destroyed, not scattered, vanished. One moment they were massing near the neutral zone near Varelia, the next, gone. Dominion scouts searched every known jump corridor, every stable wormhole, every asteroid belt. Nothing. It was as if the entire human armada had simply ceased to exist. What they didn't know was that humanity had spent the last 5 years perfecting something the Dominion never thought possible: true stealth in space. Not just radar-absorbing paint or heat-diffusing panels, real, absolute invisibility. Phase-dampening fields that bent light, gravity waves, and even quantum echoes around a ship like water around a stone. The tech wasn't perfect. It required enormous power. It made navigation nearly impossible without pre-mapped paths. And if a ship fired even a single shot while cloaked, the field collapsed instantly. But it worked. And now the Sovereign Will and her sister ships were less than 18,000 kilometers from the Dominion's primary orbital station above Varelia, K7, the command heart of the entire sector. And the Dominion had no idea they were there. On K7, Admiral Vorlak sat in a plush command chair, swirling dark liquor in a crystal glass. Around him, flags of conquered species hung limp in zero-gravity display cases. Music played softly from hidden speakers. His officers laughed, clinking glasses, celebrating what they believed was total victory. Varelia's resistance had been crushed last week. Human prisoners were being shipped off-world for re-education, and the fleet review tomorrow would show the galaxy just how powerful the Dominion truly was. "Another quiet night," Vorlak said with a grin. "Peace is boring, isn't it?" His chief of operations nodded. "Only fools wish for war during wine hour, sir." They didn't see the red dot blink on their long-range sensor board. It appeared for 0.3 seconds, just long enough for an auto-sweep to flag it as cosmic noise, then disappeared. The system logged it as background interference. No alarm sounded. Aboard the Sovereign Will, Ensign Carter Jones adjusted his targeting reticle with the calm focus of a man who'd done this 1,000 times in simulators. His destroyer, the Iron Resolve, hung just off the Sovereign Will's starboard flank. His job was simple. When the order came, he had to kill 3 Dominion dreadnoughts before they could power up their shields. "You nervous?" his gunnery officer asked. "Nervous is for people who don't know what they're doing," Carter replied. "I've been waiting for this since they took my sister." He didn't say her name. Didn't need to. Everyone on his crew knew the story. Maria Jones, civilian engineer, captured during the fall of Helios Colony. Last seen in a Dominion labor convoy. Presumed dead. On the bridge, Luke finally turned from the holotable. All ships, confirmed final alignment. One by one, ship captains responded through tight beam laser comms. Silent, undetectable, perfect. Sovereign Will, aligned. Iron Resolve, locked. Midnight Spear, ready. Free Star, standing by. Each voice calm, each ship motionless, each weapon fully charged. Ava leaned slightly toward Luke. "They're still running on low alert. Defense grid cycling through maintenance protocols. Shield generators are at 30%. Perfect, Luke said. He glanced at the countdown timer on his wrist display. 59 seconds. 58. 57. Somewhere deep in the Sovereign Will's core, capacitors the size of buildings hummed as they reached critical charge. Plasma coils glowed white-hot behind reinforced bulkheads. Targeting computers synced across the fleet with nanosecond precision. On K7, Admiral Vorlak set his glass down and stretched. "Well, I think it's time for—" The lights flickered, just for a split second. "Glitch in the power grid?" someone asked. Before anyone could answer, the entire station shuddered. Not an explosion, not an impact, just a deep, groaning vibration that ran through the metal like a scream. Then silence again, for 3 more seconds. Then hell opened. 32 human warships decloaked at once, not with flashes or energy bursts, but with sudden, impossible presence, like shadows snapping into shape. Their hulls, matte black and scarred from drills, reflected no light. Their weapons spoke before their engines even roared to life. The first railgun slug from the Iron Resolve punched through the bridge of Dreadnought XK-44 before its captain could blink. The second tore through the reactor core of XK-49. The third shattered the command deck of XK-51, where officers were still laughing over drinks. On K7, alarms finally blared, but too late. The station's main antenna array exploded in a silent bloom of fire as a grav-pulse warhead detonated inside its base, warping space itself into a crushing fist. Luke stood unmoved as red emergency lights bathed the bridge in blood-colored glow. All ships execute Phase 2. No mercy. Ava's hands flew across her console. "They're scrambling fighters. Shields coming online. Too slow." "They're not used to losing," Luke said quietly. "They don't know how to react." And that was the point. The Dominion relied on prediction, on order, on the belief that every species fought the same way, by declaring intent, lining up, and charging. But humans didn't fight like that. They studied, they waited, they struck when you were brushing your teeth, not when you were holding a sword. Carter's voice crackled over the fleet channel, calm as ice. Targets eliminated, switching to secondary group. On the surface of Virelia, far below, a young woman named Dana Miller crouched behind a ruined wall, her stolen Dominion scanner buzzing in her hand. She watched the orbital fireworks with wide eyes. She didn't know who was attacking, but she knew one thing for sure. Whoever they were human, and they had come to burn the Dominion to the ground. On the Sovereign Will, Luke finally allowed himself a small smile. "Let them panic," he said. "We've got all night." And above Virelia, the storm had only just begun. The Dominion station K7 was burning. Not with fire. There was no oxygen in space for that, but with silent, spreading clouds of superheated metal and shattered armor plating. Warning lights blinked uselessly inside its ruined corridors. Bodies floated in zero gravity, frozen in the last seconds of their lives. Outside, 3 of the Dominion's largest dreadnoughts twisted in slow death spirals, their engines dead, their command decks gone, and the humans had not even fired half their weapons. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Ensign Carter Jones didn't cheer, he didn't laugh. He simply tapped a command into his console and said, "Switching to secondary targets, Group Delta 3. His gunnery officer, Petty Officer Riley, nodded. Dreadnoughts in dry dock, still powering up. "They won't finish," Carter said. The Iron Resolve banked sharply, its thrusters flaring blue in the dark. Around it, other human ships moved like wolves through a sleeping herd. No formation, no pattern, just sudden, brutal strikes from angles the Dominion never expected. On K7, Admiral Vorlax finally stumbled to his feet, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. What is happening?" he yelled, grabbing the collar of a trembling comms officer. "Who is attacking us?" I don't know, sir. Sensors show human signatures, but that's impossible. They were light years away." "Impossible doesn't blow up my fleet," Vorlax roared. He staggered toward the main display, where chaos unfolded in real time. One by one, his ships vanished from the tactical map. Not disabled, not captured, gone. Meanwhile, deep inside the Sovereign Will, Captain Luke Bell watched the same feed but with calm eyes. "Ava," he said, "are they responding yet?" Lieutenant Ava Holt listened through her headset, her brow furrowed. "They're trying, sir, but their comms are jammed, their command chain is broken, and half their officers are still in uniform dress robes from the party." Luke nodded. "Good. Keep the jamming tight. Don't let them call for help." He knew the Dominion relied on perfect coordination. Every ship, every station, every soldier followed a master schedule. If you broke that schedule, even for 5 minutes, you broke their entire system. And right now, the Dominion wasn't just broken, it was blind. On the surface of Virilia, Dana Miller pressed herself flat against the cold ground as a distant explosion lit up the night sky. She wasn't sure what was happening above, but she knew one thing. Dominion patrols had stopped moving. Their drones hovered in place, confused. Their loudspeakers fell silent. She tapped her wrist scanner again. The human frequency was still broadcasting, low, steady, and clear. No music, no speeches, just a repeating code. Storm protocol active. All units engage. Determined, she crawled toward the ruined outpost ahead. If the humans were attacking from space, the ground forces would be vulnerable, and vulnerable meant opportunity. Back in orbit, the human fleet pressed its advantage. The destroyer Midnight Spear launched a swarm of micro-drones disguised as space debris. They attached themselves to the hulls of docked frigates and detonated simultaneously, cracking open fuel lines and triggering chain reactions that turned repair bays into infernos. The cruiser Free Star fired a single volley of magnetic pulse missiles, not at ships, but at the station's power relays. The resulting blackout plunged K-7 into darkness, cutting life support in half its sectors. And still, the Dominion couldn't react fast enough. On the Iron Resolve, Carter locked on to 3 more targets, heavy cruisers floating in maintenance cradles, their shields down, their crews half asleep. "Target acquired," he said softly. "Good night." 3 pulses of railgun fire streaked across the void. 2 seconds later, the cruisers exploded, one after another, like matches lit in a dark room. On the Sovereign Will, Ava suddenly stiffened. "Luke, new contact. A Dominion command courier just launched from K-7, heading for the far side of the moon." "Trying to get a message out," Luke said. "Don't let it." Ava replied, "Sending Midnight Spear." Within minutes, the tiny courier ship was vaporized by a single plasma lance from the Midnight Spear. No survivors, no signal sent. The Dominion remained alone in its nightmare. On K-7, Vorlax finally reached the emergency war room. "Activate planetary ion cannons. Fire on anything that moves." An officer shook his head. "Sir, the cannons are on maintenance cycle. They won't be online for another 40 minutes. 40 minutes? Vorlax nearly screamed. "We won't have 40 seconds. At that moment, a red alert flashed on every screen in the room. "Human ships decloaking near the central shipyard." Vorlax turned just in time to see a live feed cut in from the outer dock. A human battleship, larger than anything in their files, slid silently out of the nebula's edge. Its hull bore no markings except a single white stripe down the center. No name, no flag, just death wrapped in steel. That's not in the database," an analyst whispered. "Of course it's not," Vorlax muttered. "They built it in secret while we were throwing parties." He finally understood. This wasn't an attack, it was punishment, and humanity had been planning it for years. Meanwhile, aboard the Sovereign Will, Luke gave his next order. "Ava, signal all ships. Phase 3 begins in 90 seconds. Hit the shipyard. Leave nothing." "Yes, sir," she said, fingers flying. Across the fleet, crews braced themselves. They knew what came next. The shipyard held over 60 vessels, some half-built, some armed and ready. If even a few escaped, they could regroup, and Luke wasn't taking that chance. On the Iron Resolve, Carter glanced at the photo taped to his console, a faded image of his sister, Maria, smiling in front of a sunlit field. "This one's for you," he whispered. Then he pulled the trigger. Dozens of human ships fired at once. Railgun slugs, plasma bolts, grav mine clusters, all aimed with surgical precision. The Dominion shipyard didn't explode all at once. It unraveled, section by section, ship by ship, floor by floor. Docking clamps snapped, fuel tanks ruptured, reactors went critical. And still, the Dominion ships couldn't launch. Their automated systems kept demanding authorization codes, safety checks, confirmation from command, all of which no longer existed. They died waiting for permission to fight. On Virilia's surface, Dana saw the shipyard's destruction reflected in the sky like a second sun rising and dying in the same breath. She stood up, heart pounding. Around her, other rebels emerged from hiding. They didn't speak. They just looked up, eyes wide with hope for the first time in years. Because if the humans could do this in orbit, what could they do on the ground? Back on the Sovereign Will, Luke finally allowed himself to sit, only for a moment. "Casualty report?" he asked. "None so far. Minor hull stress on 2 frigates, otherwise clean run." "Good," he said. "They thought we were predictable, loud, emotional." He looked out the viewport at the burning wreckage of the Dominion fleet. "Now they know we're silent, patient, and very, very angry." The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the Dominion had already lost the most important thing, the belief that they were untouchable. And in war, that belief was worth more than shields or guns. As the human fleet repositioned for the next strike, the stars above Virelia watched in silence, witnesses to the moment the galaxy learned to fear humanity, not for its strength, but for its silence.
Panic does not spread slowly in space. It spreads like fire in dry grass, fast, hungry, and impossible to control. Within minutes of the human strike, the Zenthari Dominion's command network began to crack. Messages bounced between stations with no answers. Orders arrived too late or not at all. Officers who once barked commands with pride now whispered in corners, eyes darting toward every flickering screen. On K7, Admiral Vorlax paced the remains of his war room like a caged animal. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with soot. "I want a live feed from High Command," he shouted. "Now!" "Sir, all long-range channels are dead," a comms officer said, voice shaking. "The humans, they're not just jamming us, they're rewriting our data streams." "What does that mean?" Vorlax snapped. "It means they're feeding us fake signals. Our systems think everything is normal until it isn't." Vorlax stared at the main display. It showed 3 of his reserve frigates launching toward the moon, ready to flank the human fleet. But the officer in charge of fleet tracking suddenly gasped. "Sir, those ships never launched. They're still docked. That feed is a loop." The admiral's stomach dropped. The humans weren't just attacking, they were playing with them, making them see ghosts while real death came from another direction. Meanwhile, deep in the Sovereign Will's war room, Luke Bell studied a new holomap. "They're starting to realize we're manipulating their sensors," he said. "Inevitable," Ava Holt replied, sipping from a cold cup of coffee. "But it won't matter. By the time they reset their systems, we'll already be inside their last defenses." "Good. Keep pushing the decoys. Make them chase shadows." Outside, the human fleet split into 2 groups. One continued hammering the remains of the orbital shipyard. The other, led by the Iron Resolve, slipped toward Virilia's lower orbit, where the planetary ion cannons sat like sleeping giants. Those cannons could melt an entire fleet if given time to warm up, but right now they were offline, locked in a maintenance cycle that wouldn't end for another half hour. The Dominion had scheduled it weeks ago, confident no enemy would dare strike during a routine service window. They never imagined humans would turn routine into ruin. On Virilia's surface, Dana Miller crouched behind a collapsed wall near Sector 9, the Dominion's main command bunker. Around her, a dozen rebels waited in silence. They carried stolen pulse rifles, homemade explosives, and one cracked tablet showing a live feed from orbit. "They're not just fighting up there," Dana whispered. "They're making room for us down here." She had spent weeks mapping the bunker's underground tunnels. Now, with Dominion patrols distracted by the chaos overhead, the path was clear. "We hit the comms hub first," Dana said. "Cut their planetary link. Then we take the ion cannon control room." One rebel, a former mechanic named Leo, frowned. "What if they have backup generators?" "They do," Dana said, "but backups take 3 minutes to boot, and in 3 minutes, the humans will be inside their shields." She tapped her earpiece. A faint signal pulsed through, encrypted but unmistakably human. It was a timing beacon.
counting down. Back in orbit, Carter Jones guided the Iron Resolve through a debris field using shattered hull plates as cover. His target was the main power relay for the ion cannons, buried inside a reinforced satellite the size of a small moon. "They've got point defense turrets," Riley warned from the weapons console. "Not active yet," Carter said. "They're still running diagnostics." He slowed the ship to a crawl, matching the satellite's rotation. Then, with a single tap, he launched 4 stealth drones, no bigger than briefcases, from the destroyer's belly. They stuck to the satellite's surface like spiders and began cutting through the outer armor with sonic blades. Inside the Sovereign Will, Ava watched their progress. "Drones are in. 20 seconds to core breach." Luke nodded. "Once that relay goes dark, the cannons won't fire for at least 6 hours." "Assuming they even figure out what happened," Ava added. On the surface, Dana's team moved fast. They slipped through a maintenance vent, dropped into a service corridor, and disabled 2 guards before they could raise an alarm. The comms hub was just ahead, a room full of blinking servers and live feeds from across the planet. Leo planted a shaped charge on the main data trunk. "Ready." "Do it," Dana said. The explosion was small but precise. Sparks flew, screens went black, and across Virelia, every Dominion outpost lost contact with Central Command. At the same moment, deep inside the ion cannon control room, a technician stared at his dead console. "What's going on? Why are we offline?" Before he could call for help, the lights died. Emergency backups failed to kick in. Someone had cut the primary and secondary lines at once. High above, the stealth drones finished their work. The power relay exploded in a flash of silent fire. The ion cannons, meant to be the Dominion's last defense, fell dark and useless. On the Sovereign Will, Ava exhaled. Relay destroyed, cannons neutralized. Luke turned to the comms officer. "Send the signal. All ground cells. Now is the time." Seconds later, a single message pulsed across every open frequency on Virelia, broadcast from a human ship and rebroadcast by Dana's team from the bunker. "This is Human Liberation Command. The Dominion is blind and we are the storm." Rebels across the planet heard it. Prisoners in labor camps whispered it. Even Dominion soldiers paused, confused by the sudden silence from their commanders. In orbit, Carter watched the feed from Dana's stolen scanner. "They're moving. The uprising's starting." "Good. Now the Dominion fights a war on 2 fronts with no eyes, no voice, and no time." Back on K7, Vorlax finally received a real transmission, not from High Command, but from a scout vessel hiding near the outer rim. The message was short, terrified. "They're not fighting like humans. They're fighting like predators who studied us for years." The Admiral sank into his chair. For the first time, he felt fear. Not of death, but of being outthought. Of being hunted by a species he'd dismissed as primitive. And he was right to fear it. Because while the Dominion relied on rigid rules, perfect schedules, and predictable logic, humans thrived in chaos. They adapted. They improvised. They turned maintenance cycles into ambushes and fake sensor ghosts into real nightmares. On Virelia, Dana stood on the roof of the command bunker, looking up at the stars. The sky was full of fire and falling metal, but also of hope. "We're not alone anymore," she said. And high above, the human fleet prepared for its final move. The hammer was ready. All that remained was to drop it. The Dominion's fleet was broken, but not yet dead. Deep in the heart of what remained of their formation, the flagship Wrath of Zarnok floated like a wounded beast, its armor scarred, its weapons silent, its crew scrambling to restore power. It was the largest ship in the sector, over 2 kilometers long, built to crush entire rebel worlds with a single salvo. And right now, it couldn't even raise its shields. On the bridge of the Sovereign Will, Captain Luke Bell stared at the massive vessel through the main viewport. "They're trying to retreat," he said. "They won't make it," Ava Holt replied, already plotting intercept vectors. "Their engines are damaged. They're limping." Luke didn't answer right away. He was thinking. This wasn't just any ship. It was the symbol of Dominion power in this region. If it escaped, the Dominion would rebuild. They'd tell stories of how they survived the human ambush. They'd pretend they were still in control. That couldn't happen. "Bring the Aegis Lance online," Luke said. A murmur ran through the bridge. The Aegis Lance was the Sovereign Will's secret weapon, a focused beam of super-compressed plasma capable of cutting through any known armor. It took minutes to charge and left the ship vulnerable during firing. They'd only tested it once against the dead asteroid. "Are you sure?" Ava asked. "I'm sure," Luke said. "Today, the galaxy learns what happens when you enslave human worlds." On the Iron Resolve, Carter Jones received new orders. "Finish off the stragglers. Don't let a single ship jump to warp." "Understood," he said. His eyes flicked to the image of his sister still taped to his console. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, sharp, and final. He turned to his crew. "Launch the drone swarm, mimic debris patterns, let them think it's just more wreckage." The Iron Resolve released dozens of small, dark drones, each shaped like jagged chunks of metal, moving slowly, tumbling as if unpowered. To Dominion sensors, they looked like harmless battlefield junk, but hidden inside each was a micro-warhead, designed to stick to hulls and detonate on command. Meanwhile, on Varelia's surface, Dana Miller led her team through the smoking ruins of the command bunker's lower levels. They'd taken control of the ion cannon relay room, but now a new problem had appeared. Backup power was coming online in Sector East. "If they get comms back, they'll call for orbital strikes." "Not if we blow the core first," Dana said. She pointed to a thick conduit running along the ceiling. "That's the main power line for the whole district. Cut it and nothing turns back on." Two rebels climbed up with cutting torches. Sparks rained down as they sliced through the metal. Within minutes, the entire eastern sector went dark again, this time for good. Outside, rebel fighters surged through the streets. Dominion patrols, confused and leaderless, either surrendered or fled. In one square, a dozen freed prisoners tore down a Dominion banner and raised a torn piece of human fabric someone had kept hidden for years. Back in orbit, the Sovereign Will finished charging its main weapon. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Aegis lands at full charge," an engineer announced. "Firing window open for 12 seconds. Lock on to the Wrath of Zarnok. Aim for the bridge and reactor in one line." Ava input the coordinates with steady hands. Target locked. Fire. A beam of cobalt-white light, thinner than a ship but brighter than a sun, shot from the Sovereign Will's bow. It crossed 12,000 kilometers of empty space in less than a second. There was no sound in the vacuum, but if there had been, it would have been the sound of doom. The beam struck the Wrath of Zarnok just above its command tower. It didn't explode. It simply parted. The ship split cleanly in two, from nose to engine, as if sliced by an invisible knife. The reactor ignited a second later, turning both halves into expanding fireballs of plasma and vaporized metal. On the Iron Resolve, Carter watched the destruction without blinking. "One down," he said. "Now the rest." His drones reached the three fleeing frigates. The Dominion ships ignored them. Why waste power blasting space junk? Until the drones attached themselves to hull seams and detonated. Each explosion was small, but precise. One cracked a coolant line. Another blew out a navigation array. The third tore open a fuel tank. Within minutes, all three frigates were dead in space, spinning helplessly. On K7, Admiral Vorlax watched the Wrath of Zarnok vanish from his screen. His hands trembled. "Send a general broadcast," he whispered, "to all Dominion forces. Surrender. Surrender now." His officers stared at him in shock. "Sir, we can't." "We already lost," he shouted. "Don't you see? They didn't just beat us. They erased us before we even knew we were fighting." His voice broke. For a man who once believed himself untouchable, the truth was worse than death. Meanwhile, Dana's voice crackled over the human fleet's open channel, a signal boosted by rebel hackers from the surface. "This is Human Liberation Command. The Dominion is blind, and we are the storm." The message repeated across every planet in the sector. On occupied worlds hundreds of light years away, slaves heard it. Prison camps fell silent. Secret radios picked it up. And for the first time, people dared to hope. Back aboard the Sovereign Will, Ava turned to Luke. "Ground forces report major uprisings on 6 worlds. The Dominion governors are panicking. Some are already trying to negotiate surrender." "Good. Let them beg." They should have thought of that before they took our people. He looked out at the battlefield, once filled with Dominion pride, now a graveyard of broken ships and shattered arrogance. This wasn't just about Virelia, he said quietly. This was about sending a message. And the message was clear. Humanity doesn't start wars, but once we do, we end them fast. On the Iron Resolve, Carter finally sat back in his chair. The fighting wasn't over. There would be mopping up, rescues, and rebuilding, but the worst was done. He touched the photo of his sister. "I hope you saw that, Maria," he whispered. And somewhere in the silence between stars, it felt like she had, because the storm had passed, and in its wake, freedom began to grow. Silence settled over Virelia's orbit like a blanket after a storm. The constant hum of Dominion engines was gone, the flashing lights of warships, the chatter of command channels, the proud banners flapping in artificial wind, all replaced by drifting wreckage and the soft hiss of escaping air from broken hulls. Of the 217 Dominion vessels that had once filled this space, only 11 remained, and those were already light years away, running with every engine burning hot. On the bridge of the Sovereign Will, the tension had eased, but not vanished. Officers moved with quiet purpose, tending to wounded systems and guiding rescue shuttles through the debris field. No one cheered, no one celebrated. They had won, yes, but they knew what it cost. Captain Luke Bell stood near the observation deck, watching a medical frigate dock with the Iron Resolve. Aboard that ship, Ensign Carter Jones was helping carry stretchers. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with grease and sweat, but his eyes were clear, steady. Lieutenant Ava Holt joined Luke, holding a data pad. "Final count is in," she said. 47 human lives lost, 23 injured, most minor. Every ship is battle-damaged but space-worthy. Luke nodded slowly. "And the Dominion?" "Over 30,000 confirmed dead, most of their command staff wiped out in the first minute. Admiral Vorlax is in custody. He surrendered personally. The rest of their leadership is either dead, missing, or begging for terms." "Good," Luke said, not with joy, but with finality. Down on Virelia's surface, Dana Miller walked through the main plaza of what used to be a Dominion-controlled city. The streets were full, not with soldiers, but with people. Freed prisoners, local rebels, even former collaborators who now carried water and bandages for the wounded. The Dominion banners had been torn down. In their place, someone had raised a simple white sheet with a blue circle in the center, the old Earth Unity symbol. She stopped near a broken fountain where children were filling canteens. One of them looked up. "Are they really gone?" the boy asked. "For now," Dana said, "but we'll be ready if they come back." She tapped her earpiece. A soft voice came through. Human Fleet Command, now coordinating relief efforts. "Liberation Command, this is Sovereign Will. Prepare for evac of non-combatants. Shuttles inbound in 10 minutes. "Copy that," Dana replied. She turned to Leo. "Get everyone to the landing zone. Priority to the sick and elderly." As she walked, she passed a Dominion data terminal, its screen cracked but still glowing faintly. A live feed from the Galactic Senate chamber, thousands of light years away. Ambassadors from neutral systems stood in hushed clusters. Someone whispered, "They didn't just win a battle. They rewrote the rules of war." And they were right. Humanity hadn't used bigger guns or more ships. They'd used patience, secrecy, and perfect timing. They'd studied their enemy for years, learned their routines, their pride, their blind spots, and then struck where it hurt most, their sense of control. Back aboard the Sovereign Will, Luke finally allowed himself to sit in the mess hall. He held a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring at nothing. Ava sat across from him, her boots propped on an empty chair. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild. We help Virelia stand on its own. We find every human taken by the Dominion and bring them home, and we make sure no one forgets what happened here. Do you think the Dominion will try again? Not soon, but someone else might. There's always someone else." He looked out the small porthole. A rescue shuttle lifted off from the surface, carrying men, women, and children who hadn't seen open sky in years. Some waved as it passed the Sovereign Will. On the Iron Resolve, Carter stood on the hangar deck, watching the same shuttle. His sister's photo was still taped to his console, but now there was a new note beside it. Found. Alive. Helios Colony Rescue Team confirmed. He hadn't cried, not yet, but his hands shook as he folded the note and put it in his pocket. Later that evening, the three of them, Luke, Ava, and Carter, met in the ship's small briefing room. No formal meeting, no reports, just three tired people sharing a meal of rehydrated stew and stale bread. "They're calling it the Silent Storm," Ava said. "News feeds across neutral space are replaying the battle over and over. They can't believe we did it without firing a warning shot." "Good," Carter said. "Let them wonder." Luke looked at them both. "We didn't do this for fame. We did it because it was right." And that was enough. In the days that followed, the human fleet stayed in orbit, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Engineers helped repair Virelia's power grid. Medics treated the wounded, human and non-human alike. And slowly, life returned to the planet. But far away, in the halls of power across the galaxy, things were changing. Species that once mocked humanity now spoke of them in hushed tones. Trade agreements were rewritten, old alliances shifted. And in the dark corners of the cosmos, warlords and emperors began to ask one question. What if the humans come for us next? They had good reason to worry, because humanity hadn't just fought a war. They'd shown the universe that the quiet ones, the ones who listened, who planned, who waited, were the most dangerous of all. And as the sovereign will prepared to leave Virelia, its engines humming softly in the void, no one on board believed this was the end. It was only the beginning.